Hello and welcome back to another tutorial here at LumaClass, and in today's video we're going to be taking a deep dive into DaVinci Resolve, its entire interface, and get a little bit more familiar with the tools you have available at hand. Something to keep in mind, DaVinci Resolve is 100% free to download. There's no cost for it. There are some features that only work with the paid version of Resolve. Super cool that, we have the access to Hollywood production software at the cost of free. So there's no excuse, right? When you first launch DaVinci Resolve, it will take you to this project window that you see. Normally, you won't see your libraries right away. You'll most likely be presented with this screen here. What I recommend is next to projects, click this little button here, and that will open up your project libraries. Inside of the project libraries, these are basically the containers that are going to home or house your video projects. To create a library, you'll select Add Project Library at the bottom. This will take you to the Create Library dialog. What's nice about this is you can browse and select where you want your library. Something to keep in mind with DaVinci Resolve, your videos will not get copied over into your library. Your project libraries only contain the database information, the editing portion, but it does not carry over the actual source files, which are your video files, your sound effects, the actual files. Those are stored wherever you store them on your computer. And in a future video, I will go over my recommendations for storage and how to organize. It's great to start out with good organizational skills. That way, as you get more complex into your project, you're not having this mess of files everywhere. Once you've created a library, inside of your library is where you will create your actual projects. So these will be individual project files. They also get stored into that library. And if you're curious where the library is actually located on your computer, if you click this little eye here for the details, you'll see here it will give you an option that says Reveal in Finder. I assume that if you're doing this on a Windows computer, it probably says something like Reveal in Explorer, File Explorer maybe. You'll click on that. That will actually show you exactly where your libraries are being stored. So if you need to back this information up to an external drive or to a thumb drive or whatever external source. For starters here, we'll go ahead and launch our sample project. If your setup is anything similar to mine, you should see at the bottom here that you're probably in Cut workspace. There's a few workspaces at the bottom here. We have our Media workspace, our Cut workspace, our Edit workspace, Fusion workspace, Color workspace, Fairlight workspace, and Delivery. So those are the main. You'll basically work through these kind of almost like a chain of command. To be honest, for me personally, I don't use the Cut workspace. I normally just do all my cutting right within the editor. It's an old practice from using Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere. Let's go back here to the Media workspace. This is where you can organize all of your files. In the top left corner of the window, you will find your drives listed, as well as any external drives. If you have an external hard drive, I will show you this carefully. This is actually where I store, as I'm editing all my projects, they're going onto this hard drive. It's connected through a USB cable to the laptop. So as I'm editing, everything is being live edited off of this drive. It's a little bit messy of a setup that I have. You can just buy like an external hard drive. It's a little more organized than this. Those drives will also show up on your left-hand dialog here. This box here will show you your actual folder structure within that drive. At the bottom of the Media workspace, we have our bin here. This is essentially where you will drag and drop your clips into this area. So if you're importing from a digital camera, let's say, for example, if you have an SD card, when you plug your SD card into your laptop or into your computer, you should be able to see the SD card in the Media import here and then drag those video files that you want into your pool. As you drag these into your pool, it will add them to your project. It won't add them to the timeline. We're not actually in the editing process yet. This is just getting the files into the project. You may see this if you drag a clip onto your pool. It will ask you right away, do you want Resolve to change the project frame rate to match those video files. So if you know that whatever frame rate you were recording at on your camera or phone, whatever you have your settings set for on your device, you will want to most likely match your project. We'll go ahead and select change. The project is at the same frame rate as the actual source video files. And as you're dragging them into the pool, you'll notice on the right-hand side, we can see the metadata. So this will show us information pertinent to that particular video that we've imported into our pool. To the left of the pool, you will see the master. This is your master directory inside of that project. And if you control click on master or right click on Windows, you have a plethora of options available here inside of your master bin. We can create new bins. This will allow us to create folders where we can actually put stuff in them. So let's say, for example, video sources. We might make another bin called sound effects. This is where we will then drag all of our source files into those particular folders, likewise with sound effects. Keep in mind, it's not copying your video source files. It's not copying them onto your computer. Smart bins are basically tags. It allows you to place a keyword that can help you search for information. For example, if you have a lot of sound effects, maybe you keyword all of your explosions with the keyword explosion. Towards the top of Resolve, we have a little expand button. This allows you to give a little bit more view to your entire bin here if you're looking for files. On the top right here, we have our preview window. This will show us whatever clip that we click on, and we can also scan through that file and see a quick preview of that file. We also have our playhead along with the pause, play, rewind, fast forward options, as well as some looping. In the top left corner here, we can change how this view window looks. If you don't want to see thumbnails and you'd rather have a list view, you can change it to this list view. This can be a little bit tricky unless your files are named something specifically. Most of the time your camera is just auto numbering the files. Typically find the thumbnails a better way of referencing files in general, since you're able to see a preview of exactly that clip. To the left of our playback controls, we have what looks like some film here. If we click on that, that will allow us to then view the audio track of the particular file that we're viewing. This is useful if you need to verify some audio within that video file. And to the right of the source button here, we also have our mute. This allows us to toggle the audio as we're watching the previews back. And this here is pretty neat. So this here is a little scrubber. This allows you to scrub frame by frame, so we can get really intimate with it and do very slow scans, almost frame by frame, in order to grab certain parts of a clip. So let's say, for example, if I wanted just the end of this clip, I don't need this entire clip. I can go towards where I want to begin the clip and select on the right hand side here the mark in button. That will create a mark in that's where this clip is going to start. And then we'll just drag this, or I can actually use this jog wheel. We can jog this until where I want to stop it. So let's say from here, he looks at the camera at the end here, so we don't want that. Let's go from here down to about right here. And then we'll mark it out. And when we drag this into our project, or our project bin here, it will create a clip that's only that specific portion of that video file. Beneath the playback options are some buttons here. These are pertinent to the media bin pool here. So this allows us to zoom in and out if we want to see larger thumbnails. You can also go into this metadata view. This can be useful if you want to see the metadata of each file that you're bringing in, as well as list view. These can be useful if you have some data in there that you need to be able to view. It gives you audio, frame rates, resolution. To the right of those buttons is a grid layout. This allows you to go into a 2x2 view. And to the right of that is our search option. Search is fairly limited unless you have certain tagged information or smart bins or keywords. We also have the ability to sort our bins, the pool bins, so we can sort by the file name. A lot of other options. I typically sort by date created or date added, whether you're ascending or descending when you've added clips into your bin, since usually you're going to use the most recent clips that you've added to your bin. That that type of sorting can be quite useful. And in the top right hand of our media workspace, the audio, this allows us to see the actual waveforms or the meters. There's also the metadata. This will allow you to see information on a specific file that you click on. This can be on either your left-hand media storage or the actual project bins. This gives you extra information if you're looking for any technical info on a specific file. We also have our inspector. This we'll touch later in a future video once we get into actually editing a project. I normally work with these settings once I'm actually at the editing process. If we click on audio, this is going to give us audio settings. And keep in mind that any of these settings that we see under video or under audio, they're all specific to whatever file you're currently clicked on. So if you click on a certain video file, whatever you see on that preview window, these settings on the right are related to that file that you're currently viewing. And lastly here, we have our capture button. This allows you to import video from actual footage. If you have a certain device that's connected through USB or whatever you might have, you'll find those devices listed in here. Video capture might also be like a capture card. So if you're capturing footage from a game or from a PlayStation where you can live record into DaVinci Resolve. That's pretty much it for the media workspace. I'm actually going to skip the cut workspace. It has a lot of purpose and intent. I'm going to show this in a more old school style. I pretty much do most of my work in the edit workspace as well as the coloring workspace. All right, so this is the edit workspace. This is where you're going to be spending a lot of time constructing and designing and bringing your film together. A couple things to keep in mind. If you see this type of view right now, what you will notice, I have technically two preview windows. I have one on the left and I have one on the right. One of these, I believe, is for the timeline. The other is for your media pool as you're navigating through your files. What I recommend is going under workspace, and if you're limited on space on your display, and maybe you prefer to have it set up this way so that you can see the preview separate from your timeline preview. I personally don't. So I actually go into workspace and select single viewer mode. This will only then have one preview window. That way, as you're working with, whether you're clicking on a preview or you're working with something in your timeline, it will show whatever is active at that time. You'll see it in this display. When we bring files into the timeline, we can see that we're now able to scan through that footage. In the top left corner, you've got quite a few options here. Here's that shrink and expand option. We can select media pool, that hides it completely. We also have our effects. That will show us all of our video transitions, audio transitions, titles, different special effects. Next to that is our index. This can be useful for setting markers, points within our timeline that we want to be able to click back to right away, basically like chapters in your file or in your project or in your timeline. And the last option here on the top left corner is our sound library. This allows us to view sound effects that can be used in your project. There's some free ones that you can download with DaVinci Resolve. And if we mosey on over to the right-hand side, there's a few more options here. We have our mixer. I usually leave this on. You'll be able to see the audio levels and make sure that your audio is properly balanced. We also have our metadata. This can show you information pertinent to the file that you're currently viewing, similar to what we saw earlier. And then we also have our inspector. The inspector is going to be where we do a lot of our work. This gives us our ability to change the zoom, position of if we're cropping down a little bit into the shot. There's a lot of flexibility here, and we can also create what's called keyframes. And keyframes are useful for creating animated movements such as pans or zooms, automated. And we'll do all of this here, all this fun stuff, once we have some sample footage in a future video. And as we move over to the middle, there's a whole lot of options here. We have our trim edit mode. This is going to affect how we handle project files in the timeline. We'll get into that some more in the future. We also have our blade tool right here. Blade is useful for making cuts and edits through our footage. There's also the insert buttons right here. This allows us to insert footage from our media pool, and you can select this insert clip option. It's going to add that clip right into our project. Next to that is our overwrite what's currently on your timeline. We also have our replace clip. This allows us to replace one clip with a different clip from our media pool. Here's a useful tool that I normally keep on, which is the snapping tool. This allows us to snap the playhead to certain portions of footage. You don't have any issues with gaps in between your footage. Linked selection will allow us to separate the link between two files. So if we don't want the audio and video of a certain clip linked together, we can select that. That will then unlink the two so that we can move the audio separate from the video tracks. To the right of that is our position lock. This will lock the position of the files, ensuring that we don't accidentally move the files around. Now, when you use position lock, you are still able to trim files. To the right of that is options for creating flags or markers or chapters throughout our video project. We also have our zoom options, and this is just to be able to zoom in and out of our project timeline. And then to the right of that, we have our mute toggle. This is going to mute the sound on or off for our entire project. And when you have actual footage on your timeline, you will notice that it has layers to the left here. This will show you the layers of video, video 1, video 2. We'll get into all that crazy stuff in the future on how to use video layers. There's also the audio layers. So you might have one track, in this case for music, another track for the actual sound of footage, or even more audio tracks as you add and layer in sound effects. We can actually work with sound inside of the Fairlight workspace. This is basically where we can go and look at all of our audio and not focus on the video. We can see a little preview in the top right corner, but this is going to give us a complete control over just everything related to sound in our project. All sorts of audio effects of echo, reverb, distortion, but you can also do a lot of that from the editor. You don't have to do it from the Fairlight workspace. Let's keep moving along onto the Fusion workspace, which is to the right of our editing workspace. This allows us to implement special effects, transitions, pans. I'm not going to go too much into detail on this interface. It's not a required interface to use if you're working on simple video projects. There's 3D controls to add text in 3D form that actually goes into your footage. For example, if you wanted to add a title, but you want the title to be sitting on the top of a mountain in your footage, you can actually implement 3D text or 3D shapes and objects into your projects. Another commonly used is the color workspace. When we go into this window, it's a whole new world of being able to edit all of the color, brightness, white balance, contrast, highlights, shadows, anything to do with what we visually see. This is where we're going to be able to work with all of that. And there's ways you can copy and paste your color edits, all of your edits from clip to clip. So if you have a whole scene that's in one specific room, and when we get into color editing, there's layers to the color edits. I will say this, once you get the hang of it, it's an absolute blast to work with. That's pretty much it for this window. We'll get into the details. There's a lot in this window, such as working with LUTs. This adds different color effects. In certain ways, we can kind of tweak them. They're almost like filters on Instagram for photos. We're able to still use them. You just have to tone them down a whole lot and really look at the color science to make sure that whatever color effects you're using isn't destroying your footage, which it's obvious. What you see is what you get. Now, you might be asking, is coloring necessary? To be honest, it's not. If you have your camera set up for standard colors and you're okay with the colors that you see directly from whatever device you're using to record, it is not necessary to use the color workspace or to use LUTs at all. You can simply use your footage the way it's colored and just edit it and then go on to delivery. So that's the next workspace we're going to take a look at, is the Deliver tab. This tab is where we are going to then send our project out. So this is where we're going to create that MP4 file. We have a lot of options available to us. On the left-hand side are our render settings. We recommend, if you're using an older computer, to stick with the H.264 codec, the H.264 master. If you have a newer Apple device or a newer computer that has the good processing power and actually supports it, I would recommend H.265 once you upload your projects to YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever social platform, Facebook. They are going to compress your footage a whole lot by default. That's just by design, which causes a little bit of that blurriness or a little bit of that pixelated look into your footage, but that's just part of the compression. I recommend saving to what settings are for whatever platform you're uploading to. If you are creating DVD content, you'll want to match the DVD or Blu-ray bitrate settings that are respectable to fit your content onto that media. That is pretty much it for today's video. This was just a quick overview of the DaVinci Resolve interface. I hope that this helps you learn a little bit more on what you're looking at. And I know it's a lot. Just saying this over the top, it seems like, oh, that seems simple for you to say, but for me, it's a whole nother story. I totally get it. We will be in future videos doing it together. I will show you how I go about filming, actually editing it, and take you through the entire process step by step, so that way you get a little bit more familiar with the basic processes of editing in general. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Have yourself a blessed day. Peace out.